Welcome to Crime Story with Camila, where we dive deep into the most chilling and mysterious true crime cases. If you love real-life crime stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring you the most in-depth investigations and untold stories. Lucy Letby was not someone who stood out as dangerous. Born in 1990 in Hereford, England, she was described by friends and colleagues as quiet, diligent, and dedicated to her work. She trained as a neonatal nurse, a profession that demands patience, trust, and compassion, and by her mid-20s, she was working at the Countess of Chester Hospital in northwest England. Lucy Letby worked in the neonatal unit, caring for some of the most vulnerable patients imaginable, premature and critically ill newborn babies. Parents entrusted her with the lives of their children at moments of extreme fear and hope. Inside the hospital, she was seen as competent and calm, often volunteering for extra shifts and appearing committed to her role. To outsiders, Letby appeared to be an ordinary young woman living a modest life. She lived alone, enjoyed socializing with friends, and kept close ties with her parents. There was nothing in her background that suggested violence, criminal behavior, or psychological instability. No prior convictions, no history of misconduct. But behind the routine of hospital corridors and night shifts, something deeply troubling was unfolding. Between June 2015 and June 2016, an alarming pattern began to emerge within the neonatal unit. Babies who had been stable suddenly collapsed. Some died unexpectedly. Others suffered unexplained medical crises. Over time, hospital staff began to notice that many of these incidents had one common factor. Lucy Letby was on duty. At first, these events were treated as tragic coincidences. Neonatal units deal with fragile lives every day, and death, while devastating, is not unheard of. But the frequency and nature of these incidents raised quiet concerns among senior doctors. Still, those concerns were slow to turn into action. What no one yet realized was that this nurse, trusted, respected, and largely unnoticed, would soon be at the center of one of the most disturbing criminal cases in modern British history. By the summer of 2015, something was going terribly wrong inside the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Premature babies who had been showing signs of improvement were suddenly collapsing without warning. Some experienced dramatic drops in oxygen levels. Others suffered unexpected cardiac arrests. In several cases, infants who doctors believed were stable died suddenly, leaving medical staff searching for answers. Between June 2015 and June 2016, the unit recorded a sharp and deeply concerning rise in baby deaths. At least 7 infants died, and many more suffered unexplained collapses. What troubled doctors most was not just the number of incidents, but the strange, unpredictable nature of them. Babies would deteriorate rapidly, often without a clear medical cause. Resuscitation attempts sometimes failed despite aggressive intervention. In some cases, post-mortem examinations could not definitively explain why the babies had died. Senior doctors began quietly comparing notes. They noticed that many of the most serious incidents shared unusual features: sudden bleeding, unexpected swelling, or air found in places it should never be. In one case, a baby collapsed shortly after receiving milk. In another, blood sugar levels dropped to dangerously low levels without explanation. As the deaths continued, consultants grew increasingly uneasy. They raised concerns internally, requesting reviews and meetings with hospital management. Some doctors even suggested that the neonatal unit be temporarily closed for safety reasons. But their warnings were not acted upon. Instead, hospital leadership attributed the deaths to staffing pressures, outdated facilities, or the fragile condition of the babies themselves. The unit remained open. Nurses continued working their shifts, and the incidents kept happening. Over time, an unsettling pattern began to emerge. Doctors noticed that Lucy Letby was frequently present during, or just before, many of the collapses. This observation was deeply uncomfortable. Accusing a colleague, especially a nurse trusted with newborn lives, was almost unthinkable. At first, the idea was dismissed as coincidence. But as the months passed, the pattern became harder to ignore. In one especially disturbing case involving twins, one baby died unexpectedly. The surviving twin later suffered a catastrophic collapse and was found to have been poisoned with insulin, a substance never prescribed for that infant. This incident would later become a critical turning point in the investigation. By mid-2016, the neonatal unit was in crisis. Fear spread quietly among staff. Parents remained unaware that behind the scenes, doctors were becoming increasingly convinced that these deaths were not natural. What they didn't yet know was that this pattern would soon trigger one of the largest and most complex criminal investigations the UK healthcare system had ever seen. By early 2016, concern inside the Countess of Chester Hospital had reached a breaking point. Senior consultants were no longer convinced they were dealing with tragic coincidence. The number of unexplained collapses was unprecedented for a unit of its size. Doctors formally documented their concerns and pressed hospital executives to act, warning that babies' lives could be at risk. Eventually, Lucy Letby was removed from frontline nursing duties and reassigned to administrative work. Officially, this was described as a neutral move. Unofficially, it was a critical step, a quiet acknowledgement that something was seriously wrong. What followed was a long and painstaking investigation. In May 2017, Cheshire Police launched a major inquiry, later named Operation Hummingbird. Detectives reviewed thousands of medical records, shift rotas, blood test results, and post-mortem reports. Each baby's death or collapse was examined in microscopic detail, stretching back over several years. As investigators analyzed the data, a disturbing pattern became clearer. Many of the incidents occurred when Lucy Letby was on shift. Some babies deteriorated shortly after she had been alone with them. Others collapsed despite having shown signs of recovery just hours earlier. Police arrested Lucy Letby for the first time in July 2018. She was questioned and later released under investigation as detectives continued gathering evidence. Over the next 2 years, she was arrested again in 2019 and 2020, each time facing expanded suspicions as more cases were linked together. During searches of Letby's home, police found handwritten notes that prosecutors would later describe as deeply troubling. One note included phrases such as, "I am evil," and "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough." At the time, their meaning was unclear, but investigators believed they reflected a troubled inner state. By 2020, police had compiled one of the largest healthcare-related criminal investigations in British history. Prosecutors concluded there was sufficient evidence to charge Lucy Letby with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder involving babies under her care. In November 2020, Lucy Letby was formally charged. The case was now set for trial, a trial that would grip the nation and expose the darkest chapter in the hospital's history. In October 2022, one of the most complex criminal trials in British history began at Manchester Crown Court. Lucy Letby stood accused of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 10 others, all while working as a neonatal nurse. The scale of the case was unprecedented. It involved the deaths and collapses of infants across dozens of incidents, hundreds of witnesses, and years of medical evidence. From the very beginning, the courtroom atmosphere was heavy. Families of the babies filled the public gallery, some clutching photographs, others unable to look at the defendant. Many had waited years for answers about how their children died. Prosecutors told the jury that Lucy Letby deliberately harmed vulnerable newborns using a range of methods. These included injecting air into babies' bloodstreams, poisoning infants with insulin, force-feeding milk, and interfering with breathing tubes. The prosecution argued that these attacks were calculated, repeated, and carried out when Letby was alone with the babies. Medical experts were called to explain complex neonatal procedures and rare medical findings. Jurors heard how air embolisms can cause sudden collapses, how insulin poisoning can dangerously lower blood sugar levels, and how certain injuries were inconsistent with natural causes. The prosecution also presented shift patterns and timelines, arguing that Letby was repeatedly present during unexplained collapses. In some cases, babies deteriorated moments after being left alone with her. Lucy Letby denied all charges. Taking the stand in her own defense, she told the court that she loved her job and cared deeply for the babies and their families. She claimed she was being unfairly blamed for systemic failures within the hospital, including understaffing, poor equipment, and inadequate medical oversight. Her defense team argued that the prosecution's case relied too heavily on coincidence and hindsight. They suggested that the deaths were tragic but natural, caused by the fragility of premature infants rather than criminal acts. According to the defense, Lucy Letby had become a convenient scapegoat. As weeks turned into months, the jury was confronted with harrowing evidence and emotional testimony. Parents described last moments with their babies. Doctors spoke about their growing fear that something was deeply wrong. Nurses recounted shifts they would never forget. By the summer of 2023, after nearly 10 months of testimony, the trial drew to a close. The fate of Lucy Letby now rested with the jury. Although the 2023 verdicts brought a sense of finality for many families, the legal proceedings were not yet over. During the original trial, the jury was unable to reach a verdict on one charge, the attempted murder of a premature baby known publicly as Baby K. As a result, prosecutors pursued a retrial focused solely on that single incident. The retrial took place in 2024, once again at Manchester Crown Court. Prosecutors told the jury that Baby K had been born extremely prematurely and required intensive breathing support. According to the case presented in court, Lucy Letby was alone with the infant when the baby's breathing tube repeatedly became dislodged, an event described as highly unusual and potentially fatal. A senior doctor testified that he had walked into the room to find Baby K deteriorating rapidly, with the breathing tube out of place and Lucy Letby present, but not taking immediate action. The prosecution argued that this was not an accident, but a deliberate act that placed the infant's life in danger. Lucy Letby once again denied the accusation. Her defense team maintained that Baby K's condition was extremely fragile and that tube dislodgement could occur naturally in premature infants. They argued that there was no proof of intentional harm. After deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. In July 2024, Lucy Letby was convicted of the attempted murder of Baby K. The judge ruled that this conviction would stand alongside her existing whole life sentence, reinforcing the court's view that her actions formed part of a deliberate and repeated pattern of harm. For the families involved, the additional conviction brought renewed pain, but also, for some, a sense that the full scope of what had happened was finally being acknowledged. Yet, even with this conviction, the Lucy Letby case was far from settled. Behind the scenes, new questions were beginning to emerge, questions that would soon reopen public debate and scrutiny. The conviction of Lucy Letby sent shockwaves across the United Kingdom. But almost immediately, attention turned away from the courtroom and toward the systems that had allowed the crimes to continue unchecked for so long. In response to public outrage and the demands of grieving families, the UK government ordered a full public inquiry. The inquiry, led by Lady Justice Thirlwall, was tasked with examining how repeated warnings from medical staff were handled and why decisive action was not taken sooner. Evidence presented to the inquiry revealed that senior doctors had raised concerns as early as 2015. They reported unusual patterns of baby deaths and repeatedly asked hospital management to intervene. Some consultants even requested that Lucy Letby be removed from the neonatal unit permanently. Instead, hospital leadership initially resisted those warnings. Internal emails and meeting records showed a reluctance to escalate the matter, with managers concerned about reputational damage, staffing shortages, and the potential legal consequences of accusing a nurse without hard proof. In some cases, doctors who persisted in raising alarms were discouraged or instructed to apologize to Letby. This revelation sparked national anger and raised serious questions about leadership, accountability, and patient safety culture within the NHS. As the inquiry continued, police widened their investigation. Detectives began examining whether senior hospital executives could face criminal liability for gross negligence manslaughter, not for directly harming babies, but for failing to act when clear warnings were raised. At the same time, controversy around Letby's convictions began to grow. A group of international medical experts reviewed elements of the prosecution's evidence and publicly challenged the medical conclusions presented at trial. They argued that some infant collapses could be explained by natural causes, prematurity complications, or systemic failures within the hospital rather than deliberate harm. These findings were submitted to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which reviews potential miscarriages of justice. Supporters of Lucy Letby called for an urgent re-examination of the case, claiming that statistical correlations were mistaken for proof of guilt. Prosecutors, police, and victims' families strongly rejected these claims. They pointed out that Letby was convicted by multiple juries, that the evidence included far more than statistics, and that courts had already ruled the verdict safe. As of now, the public inquiry remains ongoing, and investigations into hospital leadership continue. The Lucy Letby case has become more than a criminal trial. It is now a national reckoning over trust, transparency, and accountability in healthcare. And for many families, the most painful question remains unanswered. Could this tragedy have been prevented?
Thanks for watching. For more interesting videos, please subscribe.